Hello, good evening, and welcome. My name is Brittany Campbell, and today we'll be focusing on understanding and advocating for the immigrant population. So, just a little background. Of course, the immigrant population is incredibly diverse. Most of us know this. It encompasses individuals from various countries, cultures, and backgrounds. To give us a little bit more of an understanding, obviously, they come from all over the world. There's a significant number of individuals originating from the countries in Latin America, Asia, Africa, and Europe. Within the United States, for example, Mexico, India, China, and the Philippines are among the top countries of origin. Immigrants population often have a wide age range. Many are working age adults seeking employment opportunities. There's also a significant number of children and young adults, especially in families of that migrate over together. Um, Educational attainment among immigrants varies widely. Some arrive with advanced degrees and professional experience, while others may have limited formal education. This diversity impacts their integration into the workforce and communities. Language skills often vary significantly, with some immigrants being fluent in the host country's language, others facing language barriers daily. This affects their ability to access services and to integrate into society. Immigrants contribute significantly to our economy, often filling essential roles in various sectors such as agriculture, healthcare, technology, and service industries. There are entrepreneurs, employees, and innovators. Excuse me. Immigrants may have different legal statuses as well, including permanent residents, temporary visa holders, refugees, asylum seekers, and undocumented individuals. This status affects their rights and access to different services. So here's some cultural attributes of immigrants. Um, Many immigrant cultures place a strong emphasis on family, often valuing extended family and collective decision making. Immigrants may bring diverse religious beliefs and practices, which may play a central role in their daily lives and community interactions. These can include respect for elders, community solidarity, and specific gender roles, which may differ from those in the host country. Immigrants often celebrate traditional festivals that reflect their cultural heritage, such as Diwali, Chinese New Year, or Dia de los Muertos. Food is a significant cultural expression, something I personally love, with immigrants introducing traditional dishes and cooking methods to their new communities. Traditional art forms, music, and dance are often preserved and shared within immigrant communities, serving as a link for their cultural roots. Many immigrants also are bilingual or multilingual, speaking their native language at home while learning the language of their host country. Efforts are often made to preserve native languages through community programs, education, especially for younger generations. So that brings us to um, challenges often faced by immigrants. One of the very first one is going to be language barriers, um, which creates a problem with access to services and brings us to the importance of needing language learning programs. So there's limited language proficiency can make it difficult for immigrants to access essential services such as healthcare, education, and legal assistance. They may also struggle to understand complex documents, interact with service providers, or even complete necessary paperwork to get their basic needs addressed. This brings us to the need for language learning programs. Language barriers highlight the importance of accessible language learning programs, including ESL, which is English as a second language, which they implement in school systems usually. These programs help immigrants to improve their proficiency, enabling better integration into their communities and broader access to opportunities. Another common barrier that's going to be a thing for immigrants is employment and economic challenges. There's going to be job market barriers. They're not being recognition of their foreign qualifications. So, for example, having a high level degree in another country might not be recognized in their country that move to, their host country. They might not transfer over, be recognized, and they may have to start all over. And then lastly, there's often an underemployment rate. There are many places that will not hire immigrant workers or don't pay them fairly. Another common barrier is legal and documentation issues. Um, it's very difficult to navigate the immigration laws, and it's even more difficult to obtain the necessary documentation they need to remain within their host country. And all this lastly can lead to the barrier of social isolation. There creates a sense of loneliness, and building new social networks can be very difficult. Again, especially when there's that language barrier and you don't think you can even connect people with people in that way. Moving to a new country is hard enough. You leave behind everything you know, then having to start over and rebuild that can be really challenging, especially emotionally physically, the well-being can suffer and can create mental health issues. So factors that actually contribute to immigrant resilience are going to be community support networks. So local immigrant communities provide essential support and resources. It's really good that they have opportunities to get plugged in. Another thing is going to be cultural adaptation and integration. There's a strong adaptability and resourcefulness of immigrants in integrating into their new societies. Then there's going to be access to education and employment. Education and job opportunities also foster resilience because it gives a sense of purpose. And then lastly, finally, family dynamics and support. Having those strong familial connections aid in overcoming whatever initial challenges they may face. So here's a little historical context of immigration policies. All this will be shared with you guys. I'm not going to go completely over everything. You know, if you have more interest, the slides will be available to you. But basically, from the early 1800s to the early 1900s, this was actually considered a period of openness as far as immigration standards and policies. Then in the 1920s, you move to the restriction era, which brings us to 1924, which was the Immigration Act, the Johnson and Reed Act, which established national origin quotas. It greatly limited immigration from certain regions, particularly Asia. The act reflected a shift towards more restrictive policies influenced by nativism and xenophobia. We then do move to post-World War II, which led to some gradual liberation. In 1948, there was the Displaced Persons Act, which allowed refugees displaced by World War II to enter the U.S., marking a humanitarian approach, which was great. Then in 1965, the Immigration and Nationality Act, Hart-Celler Act, abolished national origin quotas, opening immigration from non-European countries and focusing on family reunification and skilled immigrants. Then, in the most recent decades, there was a balancing security and openness. Immigration policies have oscillated between embracing diversity and responding to security concerns, particularly after events like 9/11 attacks, which led to increased scrutiny and security measures for immigrants. Now let's take a look at current societal approaches. So there's some challenges from historical discrimination. Of course, historical discrimination through exclusion acts and quota systems has resulted in long-standing inequalities and mistrust among immigrant communities, manifesting in challenges like economic disparities and limited access to services, which was something I've experienced in my surveys and in my advocacy efforts. Current public attitudes and xenophobia. Xenophobia remains a challenge, with some segments of society expressing negative attitudes towards immigrants, often fueled by misconceptions about economic and cultural impacts. Then public debates over topics like sanctuary cities and border security reflect these tensions impacting policymaking and shaping societal attitudes. And then there's policy debates. So immigration reform remains a contentious topic, which debates over issues such as pathways to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, the role of visa programs for skilled workers, and family reunification. Politicians and advocacy groups continue to influence these debates, often reflecting broader societal divides over the extent and nature of immigration. So here are some social policies that are currently impacting immigrants. So at the local level, there's going to be the city level support programs. So that's going to be where cities across the United States, like New York City, have implemented Action NYC, which offers free, safe immigration legal help, aiming to support immigrants with navigating legal processes related to residency and citizenship. Then there's also still some sanctuary cities. Sanctuary cities, such as San Francisco or Seattle, have policies that limit cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. These cities prioritize building trust with immigrant communities to encourage reporting of crimes and accessing social services without fear of deportation. Then when we move to state policies, the first one that's going to come up is actually tuition assistance for undocumented students. So what that looks like is like in states like California, which is where I reside, and Texas, they have policies that allow undocumented students to qualify for in-state tuition rates at public universities. Programs such as California's AB 540 allow eligible students to receive state financial aid, making higher education more accessible. And then we have state healthcare programs. So some states offer healthcare programs that include coverage for immigrants. For instance, in Illinois, the All Kids program provides affordable health coverage for children regardless of immigration status. Additionally, Massachusetts has policies that extend healthcare access to undocumented immigrants for certain essential services as well. Then we move to the federal policies, which is going to start with visa policies. So the U.S. has diverse visa categories, such as family-based visas, employment-based visas, and student visas, which are the F1. Each category has very specific eligibility requirements, and the application process can often be really lengthy and intricate. And then there's asylum procedures, which asylum seekers in the US must document a credible fear of persecution in their home country based on race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. The process involves rigorous screening and interviews, which can take significant time to resolve. It's usually years at a time. And then there's a deferred action for childhood arrivals, which stands for DACA, which is pretty common, especially in California where I reside. It was implemented in 2012. DACA allows certain undocumented individuals who came to the U.S. as children to receive renewable 2-year period of deferred action from deportation and to become eligible for a work permit. While not providing a path to citizenship, DACA impacts many by allowing recipients to study and work without their immigration status being a factor. So then we come to my advocacy plan and problem. So the issue at hand was a lack of access to affordable healthcare services for immigrant communities. The type of advocacy that I planned and did engage in was community advocacy. Desired outcome for the population would, of course, be improved access to, affordable and culturally appropriate healthcare services for immigrant communities. And then ultimately, the best outcome for society would be an equitable healthcare system where every individual, regardless of immigration status, receives the necessary medical care. This brings me to my social media campaign. Um, Things that are catchy, have some color, and can be really engaging seem to be the win when it comes to social media campaigns. So the first goal is to raise awareness, specifically about how many immigrant and refugee individuals face discrimination and barriers to access to essential services, how we can raise awareness about those struggles and advocate for change. And we want to foster empathy and understanding throughout this process as well, because that's going to get the change to really occur. So by sharing stories and experiences, we can foster that empathy and understanding in the communities. And then together we can build a more inclusive and compassionate society. And there's ways that people can get into action right away by contacting their elected representatives, writing letters. Every voice, everything counts. Immigrant rights, refugees are welcome, and we stand with immigrants. So then we had our community survey, the development of it, and how we administrated it. So some example of the questions that were in the survey, there was a total of 10, but one of the first questions was, what is your country of origin? The length of time they've lived in the United States was the next question. Then we wanted to know what your biggest challenge as an immigrant in this community is, and you were given options to select. So language barriers, employment, housing, healthcare access, legal status, education, or other, where they could give us what that other was. And then another question was, how accessible are healthcare services in your community? Very accessible, somewhat accessible, neutral, somewhat inaccessible, or very inaccessible. One of our last examples of questions that we utilized was, what resources would help improve your experience as an immigrant? And then for the administration of it all, we conducted the survey online via platforms like Google Forms and SurveyMonkey so that we can get a broader reach and response. And then we also did in-person surveys at community centers and events so that we could actually directly engage with the participants and make them feel more comfortable. And then we also ensure that there's anonymity and confidentiality to encourage honest responses and to kind of cut back on some of those barriers that could potentially come up. So in evaluating how the survey went and its results, a high percentage of my respondents identified language barriers as a major challenge. Another one was going to definitely be that they expressed a need for more accessible healthcare, but they specifically pointed towards mental health care, not just like medical needs. And then community support networks were highly valued by respondents. They mentioned how useful they are and how they appreciated having these like community support networks utilized when they're unsure of things, there's language barriers and things like that. And then what I learned throughout was that definitely need to prioritize language support programs. We need to advocate for increased funding for healthcare services, specifically mental health services, and that strengthening community networks and partnerships is going to be key and really making this advocacy effort flow and continue to grow. So evaluating the advocacy efforts. So the evaluation methodology, I used feedback from stakeholders and the participants to gauge what impact was actually made. Measured engagement levels on the social media platforms, and then We'll analyze changes in policy and community support as indicators of success. Some more lessons learned here. Definitely the importance of clear communication and consistent messaging. The more consistent you are, the more likely you're to get traction and to get seen. Um, and of course, clear communication is necessary because, beating around the bush or just kind of talking in circles or engaging in circles is not going to be taken seriously and it's not going to get you anywhere. And then the value of building strong relationships with the community leaders was definitely a huge lesson learned because that led me to network with more people. That was going to allow me to have more resources to reach and help out more in these communities of immigrants. Lastly, flexibility and adaptability and response to unexpected challenges was definitely another lesson learned, especially with language barriers. More barriers that are encountered. So barriers in implementation were actually limited resources and funding for advocacy activities. A lot came out of just whatever I could do, and we went from there. So it's a little limited. There was some resistance or lack of awareness among certain community segments. There was a lack of understanding of why there was a need to be doing what I was doing or trying to do. And there was also some difficulty in reaching diverse immigrant groups. I do feel like I could have reached more diverse groups than what I did. We did get there towards the end, but it was a little rocky in the beginning. Solutions would be to seek partnerships with local organizations for resource sharing, and then to conduct targeted outreach and education campaigns, and then lastly, to utilize diverse communication channels to reach a broader audience, like I mentioned earlier. So all in all, what's really important here, along with all the information shared, is to remember that there is a need to understand and advocate for these immigrant populations. There are humans just like us. They are a part of our society. They add to our society. It makes it rich with culture, and they help keep the cogs in society moving. So the next thing you can do to be of help is to get involved. And you can do this by educating yourselves and others about immigrant issues. You can support local immigrant advocacy groups. You can engage in policy discussions and advocate for positive change. And even a small step would be maybe sharing this presentation with other people. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you join us on this journey. Thank you for being here.